Now in this episode, I'm not gonna just talk about projects and show you everything I've done in the last 3 weeks. I've got 2 big stories to tell you.
Welcome to the channel. Please hit the like and subscribe button.
Hi everybody, JR here with Homestead Horsemanship. If you're new to the channel, what we do here is I specialize in training Missouri Foxtrotter horses and raising them, but we also just do general horsemanship that applies to all breeds, farm management, and you're going along with me as I learn how to get my pastures in shape because they are in bad shape. I have a really awesome episode to go over with you today and a ton of stuff to cover because I've been absent for the last few weeks, just working myself to the bone trying to do a bunch of farm projects before fall hits. So today we're out here, got the trusty 8N Ford 1957 model 70-something-year-old tractor, and I just moved the horses off of their first paddock. So if you've been watching, I've been talking about doing rotational grazing up my valley. So the railroad tracks here is my property line. The valley goes way up this way till my parents' farm, which you can't even see from here. It's beyond those trees. And then there's a county road here. I own on the other side of the county road that hillside that you see in grass. And then way up on top of that hillside, there's a ridge field. That's 20 acres that I own. And I'm trying to start a rotational grazing system to where I can rotate my horse herd and my sheep flock, my flurd, I'm calling it, and get my pastures to keep up. Right now, like I say, this is my first week of doing it. I had them on this pasture, it was about a 3-acre paddock for 4.5 days, 5 days. And you can see this ragweed is really tall. So I'm clipping, and here's some ironweed. This is a really bad plant. You don't want ironweed, nothing eats it. What I'm doing is I'm clipping the ironweed to the height of my grass blades. So I'm trying to leave as much of a solar collector out here because those blades of grass is your sail that, you know, powers your ship when you're trying to grow pastures. I don't know if you can see it on the GoPro because they're not good at far away image, but the sheep flock is across the creek over there. That's what's good about my rotational grazing in this paddock too, is I have a full year-long creek that flows right down the center of my valley, and I don't have to water the stock on this side of the road ever, because I just go from the road to my new cross fence that I'm going to show you. One of the big projects I've been working on. But here's how I'm fencing it. I've got one wire, one poly wire or poly braid at 11 inches and one at about 29 inches. And that keeps the horses in and the sheep in. And the sheepdogs are even respecting it. So that's a 9-wire poly braid. It's got 6 stainless steel and 3 copper wires. There is the horse herd. They're right up there about to the extent of this paddock. I'm trying to keep all my paddocks about 3 acres because I've got like 14 horses in there and 30 some odd sheep. So one of my projects that I've been working on the hardest the last couple weeks, I'll show it to you, is the permanent electric fence, high tensile electric. I use 12.5 gauge, 180,000 pound electric wire, and it goes from this tree all the way to my parents' property where it ties in. And what I did is I just stayed 10 yards inside the wood line, and most of that is in cedars. And cedars are a real acidic tree. You see below a cedar tree, like right here, there's not a lot of undergrowth. I didn't have to clip this. So my thought is the cedars will keep me from having to maintain the fence line as much. And it also gives just a little area for the horses and sheep to escape the horse flies and mosquitoes. So now, you know, a new project will be to cut a fence line up to this hill, over this hill, cross the next valley, go, you know, basically around the property perimeter so that they can graze the power line hills. Because I actually own to the other side of this power line as well. And matter of fact, I might just go up there and show that to you here in a minute, because I don't think the channel has ever got to see the views from the top of this hill. Yeah, I'll do that. So I don't want to get in too educational or too sciencey on this grass stuff before I get to the awesome stories, because I know too many of you will click off. But I just wanted to show a couple other species that I'm kind of combating or utilizing out here and why I'm clipping. So this is chicory, I believe, and you can see how stemmy it is and how rough it is. Well, its root is just as tough and just as stemmy. So in times of drought like we had this summer, its root can penetrate through the hard pan and get down to the water layer and bring up those nutrients and moisture from the deep that the grasses can't. And then the other one that I wanted to point out is this critter right here. So this is Cerisa lespedeza. This is an invasive species that was brought in during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s by the conservation to our area to stabilize for erosion. It will grow without any water at all. In its youngest phases, it does have a little bit of protein, and the sheep will eat it, and the horses don't necessarily spit it out if they accidentally bite it like they do ironweed. But in its later stages, when it gets stemmy, which doesn't take long, it has too many tannins for them to eat, and it loses all of its nutritional value. And each one of these stems, I forget if when I learned this, if it was 4,000 or 400, either way, it's a lot, can get 4,000 seeds per stem, and they have zero nutritional value. Like, an animal will go bankrupt eating those seeds, like a quail or a rabbit or a field mouse. There's not enough energy in the seeds for them to eat them, digest them, and gain weight. When I used to be an avid rabbit hunter, I hunted big patches of this stuff, like where it was nothing but Cerisa. And in the wintertime, I had more than one occasion I found rabbits frozen to death, just sitting there in their nests because they didn't have enough nutrients to produce the heat they needed to live. And it doesn't get that cold in Missouri. So we're trying to combat it. Now, unlike the ironweed, it does have one redeeming quality or two. Like I said, it has protein when it's young, pretty high protein when it's young, I believe. But those tannins, when it gets older, and the seeds have anti-parasitic properties for sheep and goats. So if you would graze your goats on a 100% stand of this stuff and push them real hard to make them eat it, they will have less parasites when they come out than when they went in. And that intensive grazing actually can turn a field. It won't eliminate this stuff, but if you push them real hard on this, you'll get about 20% more variety in your pastures. You know, warm seasons can come back and stuff like that. There's studies on the internet done by the Missouri State, I think the Osage Research Center. You can read those. I've read them. They're pretty interesting. But anyway, back to work. I'm gonna brush hog this hill next, and once I get to the fence line up there, you can see where it turns from grass to brush. I have a cross fence, but I still own further. I'll stop the tractor, walk to the top of the hill, show you the back side of the hill, some future projects, and the views from up there. I don't think that this channel has ever seen that. And then next, we're gonna head down towards the river and go over those projects. Okay, got the rest of this bush hogged. So let's go on up to the top and I'll show you the views from up there. But first, I just wanted to give you a little disclaimer about some of the stuff I said down there. I am not an expert, I'm an experimenter. So like what I told you about the chicory, 35% sure I'm accurate on that, but I'm not even sure that's the right plant. So you might want to look that up, or even better yet, does anybody know Greg Judy? Comment to him, or share this to him, or tell him about it, get him to comment on this video. That'd be really cool, because he is an expert, and that's who I've learned a lot of the stuff that I'm doing here from. He's the reason I got the sheep. As far as the Cerisa lespedeza I told you about, I am 99% sure I was correct on everything I told you about that. And as far as whether or not clipping right after the rotation is a good thing to do in mid-August, I'm only doing an experiment on that. I can't tell you whether or not that's the right thing to do or not. For the last 6 years, I've been trying the non-clipping method, and that has not worked for me. I think that only works if you have a strong stand of grass that is able to compete with the weed load on its own due to how thick its cover is. My weed load is higher and thicker than my grass, so it is not able to outcompete, and not brush hogging has not worked for me. So this year, it's my first year of clipping often. Probably the third time I've clipped the bottom and the second time I've clipped this hill. And like I said, I was trying to clip at the height that the grass stopped and the weed started, so that I could return that ragweed was the predominant weed, return it to the thatch layer before it went to seed, kill the, which ragweed is an annual, clip the Cerisa, Lespedeza, before it went to seed. It's a perennial. And then also just to let the grass come back with a vengeance. Hopefully we're supposed to get a rain in the next 2 or 3 days. Okay, let's go to the top. Whew, okay. We made it to the top. You can see right there is the railroad track pasture that the horses just came out of. The second crossing of the driveway on the railroad tracks is my property line on that side. It goes up to the ridge field all the way down to the river. It's on the railroad tracks. The house, just so you know, would be back in that way. I think you can hear Emery mowing the grass in the distance. The reason we came up here, I wanted to show you the property line on the other side of the power line. So my property comes up that valley, corners, comes up and over this hill, and I have a 40-acre section over here that goes down to the river, 40-acre square instead of the big rectangle of the valley. I own across this valley, halfway up that other hillside, if you can see it, there is a fence right about there, and right there I have a hunting blind that faces back this way, and that's where me and the kids do most of our deer hunting. We eat about 4 deer a year. It keeps our beef bill way down, and it's a renewable resource. Make room for 4 new deer every year, because whether you hunt or not, this farm holds about 18 to 22 deer at any one time, and I know that from counting at night, spotlight surveys. Alrighty, that's 2 of my scenic views, if you count that as a scenic view. I do. And this is one of the scenic views. I have 6 scenic views from my farm. Scenic overlooks, I should say. All right, next, what we're gonna do is head down to the river. I'll show you the projects I've been working on down there. And that is where one of my stories took place, the Bigfoot story. So we'll go do that, and then we'll go on to the next projects. So I was telling you about how my property corners and squares to a 40-acre square here. In between me and my parents, there's 2 40 squares, so an 80-acre rectangle that government property that me and my dad have landlocked, and it's kind of virgin timber. It's never been logged, and nobody goes back there. Nobody has access to it except for us, and that's why I believe a lot of my Sasquatch, Bigfoot activity that I have had on the farm comes from that secluded virgin timber. Whether you believe in them or not, I've had 10 or 15 weird experiences with him over the last 6 or 7 years. Everything from gifting dead animals, including animals that don't even exist in Missouri, like snowshoe hares. I've had 2 of those given to me, a live crappie, all on trails that I just went down and turn around and come back and there'd be a gift. I've made new trails and come back and have trees go down the trail, turn around, come back and have trees broke over, or the next day usually have trees broke over at 6 foot tall across the trail, 2 different directions. So I don't know, heard hoops and whistles and all sorts of weird things. One time This isn't the Bigfoot story, but I'll go ahead and share it since I'm here. I shot a deer, or a coyote out of that hunting blind because we'd been having coyote problems with the sheep. Drove the ATV back around, come up this valley, straight up the middle of the valley to the house. Waited a couple hours, went back to see if I had hit the coyote or not, because after you harvest an animal, you usually give it time to make sure everything's copacetic. Anyway, when I came back through, there were 6 boulders thrown out in that field where I had drove. Well, I say thrown. There were 6 boulders that had gotten there that weren't there when I drove through the first time. And by boulders, I'm talking bowling ball sized rocks. Farmers know where every rock is in their field when they brush hog. So, all right, let's go down to the river. I'll show you those projects.
So this is the path down to the river, and it's also the area where we just had the flock and the horses pinned up for a few weeks while we let the pastures recover, while we were getting that good rain. So I've already removed the temporary fence, and if you look to the left, you'll still see some fence posts. Like right there is a area where you can like a tensioning H-brace. Well, I have just, one of the projects we've done is we just removed the original or existing property fence, and I stacked the brush over to the right. And I had my neighbor Harry help me with that because he has an excavator, and now I'm probably going to burn that brush and then spread the ash out. And then you can see the property line over there where it gets green, but that fence was growed up and dilapidated, and that's one of the projects I needed to do, was clean this whole area up. And I eventually want to make a good 3-acre pasture out of this area as well.
Okay, so another project I've done while I've been not making as many videos was to move the horses and sheep down to this river pasture. So we just drove along the left side of the river pasture, goes up to the main pasture. Now I want to show you where I had to take the temporary fence that I put up, and I had to clear this all so that I could put a temporary fence up. And matter of fact, this part of it is still up. I need to take it down. What I did is I had to run this fence right here back to, and this path I cleared back to that power line hill I was just brush hogging. And then when I tied it into the river, it's not fenced at the river. That's where they were getting their water. They could go down to my river bar and get water. And I just figured the horses wouldn't swim downstream through that deep water to get out, and the bank on the opposite side upstream is too steep to get out. So I run this fence into the river above the gravel bar, and the other fence I run into the river below the railroad bridge. And here's a neat little spring that comes out of this hillside. Just a little side thought. And see this little bluff that starts here and goes that way? We would like to build our house eventually right here that overlooks the river. That's one of the top spots where we would like to build if we ever get ahead enough to get out of the trailer house. This fence here is where I had the potential Bigfoot encounter. Well, anybody that's put up enough temporary electric fence knows that when an animal runs through it, what happens, and this isn't on, it stretches and stretches and stretches and stretches in a V up in the woods, and it'll stretch a long ways, usually 20 yards even. And then it'll break, and all of your ends of your V will be up in the woods. Well, that's not what happened this time. Right here, oddly enough, where this tree is either pushed over or fell over naturally. We won't blame this on Bigfoot, even though it's very suspicious that exactly where this knot is where both ends were broke. This side was pulled down into the river, into the water, and this side was pulled up and over that bluff. And I mean pulled like 100 yards up through the woods that way. stretched by the ends, not by the middle, not like it was pulled one way or the other. It was just really weird. And let me get around the thickest part of the brush that he went through. But it was pulled, went up over this rock here, and a whole bunch of these trees that are dead now, see all the dead foliage there on that big rock? Those were broke off, snapped off. The rope was right up over that rock, and that big rock used to sit, that was the top, and that's a 4,000 to 6,000 pound rock. I've moved a lot of rocks with heavy machinery before, so whatever broke these pawpaw trees off moved that rock, and where it moved that rock, in my opinion, it had to bear down, and it left a perfect footprint. It was about 4 inches bigger than mine, and I'll put the pictures here now and describe them to you. But that fence was pulled up over that fence, or over that bluff, and the other fence was pulled down to the river. It was not broken a V like a horse ran through it or a deer run through it. And that's my Bigfoot story. I'll show you the print.
Okay, so I have the toe of my boot even with the front or toe of the print, and then the heel of the print goes all the way back to that back pawpaw leaf. Now here I've removed the debris from the print so that you can see it without the leaf litter and stuff that had been pressed down into the print. And this is the picture of the fence pulled up and over that rock and over the bluff with the broken pawpaw trees.
Take it or leave it. That's one possible explanation of what happened. And there's the river. My property line, just while we're down here, so you can kind of get a feel for the way everything lays, is let me see if I can see the fence through here. So this fence line goes up and turns and takes a right hand turn, oh, about where that big sycamore tree is, maybe a little further. It goes right back to my hunting shack and that red gate I showed you from the scenic overlook, and it ties into the river. So now you've seen just about all of my property. Okay, now we're back up here by the road. You see the flock has been up here. Here's the other side of the temporary paddock that we have the horses and the sheep in together. So one of the projects that I did this summer was all along both of these fences on both sides of the road, I put what would be a 5th strand of wire, but is high tensile 12.5 gauge electric. I put the bottom wire at about 6 inches and this one at about 15 inches. And it has held the sheep in pretty good. So now I can just run a straight shot like this. Temporary poly fence that I have run is a straight shot from here across the valley to that hillside where I built the other permanent high tensile fence that I showed you earlier. And this spot right here is where the second story happened. The fence line that we cleared that I showed you down at the river, I had my neighbor helping me, and we had some equipment broke down right here at this parking spot, and he and I were trying to get it out of here before it rained one evening. And across the hill here, up here at this point, Bob, the herd stallion, showed up. And he came down all by himself from the ridge field. That is not the top of the hill. It's an optical illusion. That's only about a third of the way up the hill. We're going to go all the way to the top here in a minute. But he came down and looked at me working down here at this spot, and he did a kind of, not an alarm whistle, but he basically used his body language and his voice to tell me that there was something wrong and he needed me to go with him. So I just know the horse so well and we're so connected, I could tell what he was saying. It starts with a high pitch and goes to a low pitch, and I don't want to embarrass myself by trying, but I'm not very easily embarrassed. So it was like
like a donkey?
And yeah. And then he would toss his head and do a 180 circle with his shoulder leading away from me. So the same technique that you're trying to do body language in a round pen when you turn and get the horse to link up with you, he was doing to me from up there. He did 3 of those whinnies and then he went back up the hill, and I just instantly knew he was telling me there was something wrong with the brood mares and he needed my help. But I was too busy because I was working with the equipment, broke down, trying to beat a rain, and it was almost dark. So I called Emery at the house. I said, hey, Bob just came down and told me that there was something wrong with the brood mares and he needs you to go check on them. So she didn't question it. She went up there, and I'll show you when we get up there what was wrong.
This is some footage climbing the steep part of the hill past the switchback where we had seen Bob come down. I just wanted to leave that in to show the journey to get all the way up to the top of this ridge field, and then show you this scenic view when you turn back around.
We're up at the ridge field. So the path we just came up is right over there. It's about a 20-acre field. And this was another one of the big projects I just did. So just last weekend, Emery and I brush hogged the whole pasture. Then and Isaac, he did a lot of the brush hogging. He's getting very good on tractors. And then we disked up all the areas that weren't growing grass. Like right here, you can see it's growing pretty good grass. We didn't disc this. We disked up all the main part over there that wasn't growing grass, and some over there that wasn't growing grass. Reseeded the whole thing, even in the grass, with a fixin' mix, seed mix that has annual clovers, radishes, other legumes that produce nitrogen in the soil. So it's to fix the nitrogen content in the soil. So this is the property fence here. This is on my property line for the most part, and it goes down off over this hill to that second railroad tracks. So what Bob the herd stallion was telling me is right down here, just past this dead tree, my fence just terminates. I just haven't built the rest of my property fence. And for years, this fence wasn't even in here. The horses were just free to go off my property. And we're so rural here and so secluded that they'd have to go miles to get to the interstate through the woods, or miles to go to the next private property. So I just didn't worry about it. I knew they'd stay at the grass and they'd come home. Well, the little baby horse and Jesse, so Jesse and Jesse's boy got around that fence and were on the wrong side of the fence, and Bob couldn't get them back. So Emery came up here, found that, and she couldn't get the mare to come around either. So I did have to come up here that night in the dark and in the rain when I got done with the equipment and get Bob his little boy back. So I just thought that was awesome, that the stallion was worried about that little foal mostly and knew he couldn't fix the situation, and he come looking for me. He heard me working on that equipment, comes running down the hill, and in no uncertain terms told me what was wrong and to come up there and help him. So there's 2 good, some people would say unbelievable stories that both happened in the last couple weeks that I haven't been filming. So while I'm up here, I'm gonna do a little project for me and Isaac, and I'm gonna brush hog just on the other side of my fence because I want it brush hogged. But I'm also, in this area right here, I'm gonna clear up the brush and the trees, and then I'm gonna till this and make this a food plot, a winter wheat food plot. And that way we'll have a deer stand in this cedar tree, one of these cedar trees here anyway, because I like sitting in cedars. It masks your scent and it stays green, so it always gives you a dark background to sit in. And I'm going to make it a primitive weapon stand where he and I can hunt with our recurve bows and atlatls, and push comes to shove and we need to meet, we'll rifle hunt out of it too. But with this field being planted with the annual clovers, then the winter wheat we'll put here, there should be a lot of deer coming in here. And what's good is over there at that tree, it falls off into a huge steep bowl that you can't traverse. And over here is another valley, and going this way, right behind the cedar tree, is a long ridge that deer like to feed into this field from. So it's going to be a natural funnel It'll be food attractant. And then the last thing I'll do to make sure that we're in range of deer is I'll take this bottom wire of this fence and I'll tie it down to the all the way to the ground. I'll take the middle wire and tie it up to the top wire, leaving a huge hole right here. And those deer will learn to go through that hole, so it'll be an attractant. Sorry to all my viewers that don't support hunting, but don't care. And we do. It's a great way to eat healthy. And you're eating something that's off the land. You're only killing one animal to eat that, as opposed to in farming where you have to kill all the animals if you're going to eat a crop. You know, you're killing voles and moles and field mice and rats and rabbits and deer habitat, turkey habitat to plow up a field and eat a vegetable. Deer hunting, there'll be 2 babies born next spring to replace the one we killed this year. And as far as healthiness of the meat, you can't get any healthier than deer meat. One more thing, forgot to mention, after we planted the fix-and mix, we overseeded the entire 20-acre field with the original horse pasture mix that has bluegrass, timothy, orchard grass, ladina clover, red and white clover, and I think that was it. So then we used a cultipacker on everything to pack that seed in, and then we spread 45,000 pounds, nope, sorry, 45 tons. So 90,000 pounds of lime up here on this 20 acres, 3,000 pounds to the acre, or a little more. And was gonna spread some down there at the bottom too, but the knucklehead, I was up here working, the guy who delivered said, "Where do you want it?" I said, "Just inside those red gates at the bottom of the field." He backs in, turns to the creek, backs into the flowing creek and dumps the lime, and it all washed downstream. So there was only 3 bucketfuls on the Bobcat left to lime the bottom field, and I am done spending money. All of these projects to combat the drought this year, I've run up $33,000 in debt that I put it all on credit. So my ambition is to go full tightwad mode right now and pay that off as quickly as possible. I'm wanting to pay that $33,000 off and next year's $25,000 farm payment off all this year. So, and that's with a operating expense of about $24,000 on average, and I make $60,000 at work. So you tell me how the math's going to work out. People say it's all about the money when you're farming. This year's budget, 25 farm payment, 33,000 on credit, 25,000 operating expense. So, you know, you do have to consider what stuff is worth and the value and make smart decisions. But if you like the projects that you have seen and the horses and the channel and you want to support us, just watching the video and commenting and interacting is enough. But there's also a family center link to the farm and home store. I'm going to be weaning the babies soon, probably within the next month. So we're going to add a bunch of mare and foal, Omeline 300, Equine Junior. Since the lime was ruined down in the fields, there's bag lime at Family Center. I'm going to add about 30 bags of that pelletized lime, and I can spread it with the ATV spreader to the list at Family Center, and some fertilizer, and that might help. And then there's also the Patreon channel if you want to help support the farm and the homestead. The Patreon has really been saving our bacon since the YouTube went down in June, whatever that glitch was that limited our visibility and shadow banned us and took away our monetization. So y'all have been great. Only have one more project to show you yet on this video, and that's a barn down in the valley. All right, now we're down in the pasture again in this old barn, and this is another one of the projects I've been working on. I had 20 years of hay and manure in here I've been scooping out. I'm going to put a gravel floor in it. I've been fixing and replacing the rotten boards, tore the old roof off, added new boards, support, replaced a tie or two. This is a railroad tie construction building, so I've replaced a few of them that need done. Dadgummit! Thought I killed all the wasps, but that one just got me. I didn't even do nothing to him. I keep the rams down here so they don't breed this ewes out of season. I want my ewes born in the springtime. There's more of that permanent electric fence we put in the woods to separate the horses. There's the herd of horses in their paddock that they have right now. About Wednesday, I'll move them. I'll put a fence on the other side of this barn. I'll have to clean up all this debris and give them about 3 days on this. So we had a flash flood the other day also, and this pen has been here 20 years, and the creek got up so high that it actually washed the rest of this pen out. We've got the sheep in the smaller catch pen now. I got to rebuild this, stand the fence back up, put in some new posts, and that way the sheep can come down here and water themselves. At least that's how it's always worked in the past. So, never-ending struggle. But thanks for watching this video. I know it was a little longer than most. Didn't have as many horses in it. Talked about a lot of different things and a lot of different topics. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more of these type of videos where I just narrate everything that's going on around the farm. And we'll see you next time. Make sure you subscribe on the way out. Thank you. God bless. This is what you do when you get stung by a red wasp. You go to your mommy and you make her take it all better. Bow on it. Yeah. Now I'm all better.